of Lent, Jesus is looking forward to his own persecution and his own going up to Jerusalem and dying there. And he makes a snide comment about, you need to go up to Jerusalem to die. Well, that's not necessarily the case, but he does point out that there is a cost in being a prophet. And all of God's people are called to be prophets. Now, I'm sure you have, and I have, been very encouraged over the last few weeks by the response of our government and the response of our people who want to welcome persons from the Ukraine, those who are fleeing from Putin and from the destruction of that poor country. And our hearts are in the right place. Americans have often done this. But in addition to celebrating the fact that we seem to be coming together, even over political lines, that hasn't happened any time in the last several years, we seem to be at least in an agreement that we need to be helping those people. But we also need to be aware that we have not always been responsive. Part of the prophetic challenge to the church is to also be honest about the fact that we have traditionally turned away boatloads of Haitians who have landed on this shore, but who have not been welcome. And at the southern border, we have thousands of Hispanic, Spanish-speaking people at least, who are clamoring at our borders, and their lives are just as endangered as the lives of the Ukrainians. Why is it that we do this? When I was a child in the 50s, in school, we welcomed a new student in my class. His name was Nick, and he was from Hungary, and we were wonderfully welcoming of the Hungarians. And this congregation has been very instrumental in welcoming persons from Afghanistan, who we also have an obligation to help, since many of them helped us over the last many years. But we seem to fall into racism when it comes to our welcome. I particularly grieve over the Haitians because I've had a long-standing relationship with Haiti and have friends there. Wonderful people, persecuted and in danger of their lives, have tried to come to this shore, but we have not welcomed them. We need, each of us, not just the clergy, but all of us, to be prophets, to talk about this reality as a way of also addressing the systemic racism that continues to plague this city, our existence, and this nation. Jesus talks in the gospel also, or not Jesus, but the gospel writer talks about Jesus as the truth, that the incarnation, the love of God, is the ultimate truth. Truth is something else that we need to be prophetic about in our culture. I'm a pretty old person, older than I look, actually, and that's always nice to be able to say, but it's true. I'm 80 years old, and I have lived through a lot of American life. But I don't ever remember a time in which truth was under such fire. Whole segments of our culture buy into alternative realities that have no reality whatever. We need to be more strong in our opposition to the perpetrations of untruths, of falsehoods and lies. Now, politicians have for a very long time often told some untruths, but we're reaching new heights of that in our politics today. Probably most obviously is the big lie about the last election. But it's not just in one party. We find that people in all kinds of places, including daily life, are stretching the truth. It's okay to cheat on tests or cheat to get the job you want, or to do some creative lying to get what you want. It's the result of a new kind of way of thinking of life as the end justifying the means. But the end justifying the means doesn't work very well, because the means we use to get to the ends we desire automatically influence the ends themselves. So if you use corrupt means, even though what you hope in the future would be something good, there's no way that good can come out of that corruption or that lying. So where does that leave us? It leaves us as a church to be more forthright about lying, to point out where it's taking place and how it's taking place, and to confront people, even people in authority, when lies are heard. It also is important for the people of God to take that prophetic idea and carry that out in their own midst. To speak out to your neighbors when you hear lies being perpetrated. To really stand up. And the way to do that is largely to use I statements. I believe in telling the truth. I sometimes share with people when I'm in a discussion with them about this, that in the family I grew up in, the bottom line was truth. If my brother or I did something that was bad growing up, we were likely to get punished because my parents were pretty strict parents. But if you tried lying about it, you discovered that the punishment was far more severe. And I see several people nodding their heads, so my parents weren't the only ones. I mention this because in our culture, people don't even always think that way. You know, it is fair to say that lying destroys families. If you think about all of those persons who are in broken families, not all of them are as a result about lying, but many of them are. Keeping alcoholism a secret is a way of lying to oneself and to others in the family. Being supportive of the person who has the problem instead of urging them to get the help they need is a way of working into the lying. It destroys the very fabric. If you can't trust someone, then you really cannot work effectively with them. If you can't trust each other in the church, you can't work effectively together. This is why in so many churches, virtually all churches, this has happened to some degree. Dishonest clergy or sexually predatory clergy have done such a damage to people's lives because they expected honesty and forthrightness and a sense of moral compass in these folks. Ultimately, buying into lying, which has happened a lot in our culture recently, is causing the demise not only of a Christian virtue, but also of our country's values. I'm hoping that one of the things that will happen by our coming together from various sides of the political equation over the issue of the Ukraine will be also a coming together in realizing that we cannot keep lying to each other and move forward as a culture. And we certainly can't keep our democracy if we do that. I'm hoping that the current actions of the autocrat in Moscow will help people to realize that we are on the verge of moving toward autocracy in this country. In fact, we've already made some very giant steps in that direction. We need to speak out about that kind of unbridled power, and we need to use people like Vladimir Putin as examples of how destructive autocracy is, so that we can avoid it in our own land. But we're not going to avoid those kinds of pitfalls if Christians aren't called to live into their prophetic call. And all of us are called through our baptismal covenant to be prophets. It's easiest to be a prophet in somebody else's land, as Jesus is alluding in the gospel. But most of us don't get a chance to do that. We have to be prophets right in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our places of work. This will sometimes mean that we will lose friends. But if they are real friends of ours, they will be able to take us at face value and to be able to work with us. And if we lose them, we probably haven't lost people who were really that much friends to begin with. But the time is now, and Lent is a perfect time to work for honesty, to work for the alleviation of the poor, and to do so in ways that we can make a prophetic witness. This city of Baltimore, in which you and I live, this wonderful country in which we live, is yearning for that voice of prophecy. So have courage. Like Jesus, go forth and go up to the Jerusalems of your own life and prophesy. Prophesy knowing that God is calling you to be an agent of change and an agent of renewal in the world. Amen.